Hey everybody, Jim Donnelly here, technical agronomist with DeKalb Agro in Northern Illinois. And I am joined by Rachel Willis, also technical agronomist with the Northern Illinois team. And we're back for our bi-weekly agronomic update video. This week, we're going to talk about a few things. First and foremost is going to be some just corn that's being stressed just because of dry weather, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and our thoughts on the impact that could have on the corn or not have on the corn. Second is we're seeing a decent amount of chemistry carryover in soybeans, particularly from the HPPD class of chemistry. So we talked a little bit last time about carryover in corn. This time we're seeing quite a bit in soybeans, and I'll touch on that a little bit here as well. And then to round off the session, we're going to talk a little bit about corn rootworm and what we're seeing. I know last time we talked, we were kind of anticipating here in the next couple weeks that we would get it, and sure enough, like clockwork, we're starting to see some rootworm as well. So I guess to kind of start off in terms of stress, so these last couple weeks, you and I have had a pretty big difference in environments, right? It's always been fairly dry for the far northern part of Illinois, and your territories had all the gully washers, etc. So we've had quite a bit of a big difference. I would say we're seeing a little bit more similarity between our territories here, so not a lot of as big differences to talk about. So there has been some scattered rain showers. If you've been lucky enough to get under some of those, you've gotten some decent rains. But for the most part, the bulk of our territories have been kind of dry. So we've gotten some questions on stressed looking corn. So now that it's been hot, hasn't been as much rainfall. We're getting some questions on what that stress is doing to the plant. So if you could kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what your opinion is on this leaf rolling and all that stuff, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, so I think that anytime you see your corn starting to roll up, it doesn't feel good.
Right.
But I'm not too worked up over it right now. So there's going to be genetic differences between hybrids based on their phenotype, based on how they respond to drought. So some may roll more than others, but in general, that's not really an indication of how well they're handling it or not handling that heat and drought stress. I think, my territory, we have started to feel a lot drier, but we probably have a little bit of a better subsoil moisture than other areas. Mm-hmm. There are some areas that genuinely are very, very dry. My territory is dry, but not to the point of me being really that concerned about it. When you start to see that rolling, again, it's just kind of an indication that plant is trying to defend itself, conserve whatever moisture it still has. So not that big of a deal. One thing that I did think about as I was walking plots here the last couple weeks, we're kind of at that probably most of our corn is V6 to V10-ish growth stage. And that's really when we started to determine, to set our ear size, so determine the kernels around the girth of the ear. Now, if we are really, really stressed at that time, that's not a good thing. Clearly, we're going to limit yield. But in most cases, that girth that the kernels around is really set through genetics for the most part. So you have some ears that are just always going to be girthy, some that are not going to be near as girthy, and that's just how, genetics, that's their potential there. So I think in a lot of cases, we're not to the point where we're really going to be taking away a lot of those kernels around.
No, I was just going to say, so a hybrid that generally does 14 around is probably never going to do 20 around, right? That's just not going to happen.
Yep.
So
if you have one that's 16 to 18, that's fairly common. 16 to 18, maybe you'll have some that are more on the 16 side than the 18 side. But again, even just because we're seeing that rolling, that doesn't mean that it's just so far beyond stress that it's going to start shrinking down ear size just yet.
Gotcha.
So it is concerning to see it rolling, but really you're going to have genetic variation in how it handles it. as well as variation in just what it looks like while it's going through this stress period.
Okay.
So
So what point, so if a lot of them are in that V6 to V9 stage, you know, and are rolling pretty good, and, you know, we don't get as concerned for most geographies. We don't get as concerned at that stage. At what stage do you say, okay, now we're really starting to suffer and maybe take a hit from lack of moisture?
So I would say when there's like a very obvious lack of turgor pressure, so it's starting to wilt, it's starting to die. I mean, I've seen that even just in my garden. If I forget to water it and it doesn't have well-developed roots, it kind of starts to wilt and to have lack of turgor pressure. To me, that's more concerning. You know, early on in the morning, you'll probably see it unrolling just a little bit more. At night, you'll see it unrolling just a little bit more. At that point, not really that concerned about it.
Okay.
It's when it becomes really severe. Have you seen anything different way up north where you have?
I would say yes. I mean, to
Unfortunately.
the north and east. I mean, there's certainly fields that, you know, look like onion fields. It's you know, not a good situation. So even as young as that corn has been, you know, you get to V5 and you're looking like that. I would be concerned at that point. It's not the end of the road by any means. If it cools down and we get a decent amount of rainfall, it can quickly recover. But you certainly don't like to see it looking like onions. And you know, there's certainly potential to take the top off there. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've found as I think back through plots that I've done in the past, through different field situations that I've seen, we always underestimate the ability of corn to handle whatever stress, whether it's
Absolutely.
late planting in 2019, whether it's wet conditions, whether it's hot, dry conditions. We always want to underestimate that, and I try to keep that in the back of my mind.
Exactly.
That we generally underestimate our hybrids there.
Right. Well, we always want to say never let corn have a bad day, right?
Correct.
But then we're saying that okay, it's okay not to have any water. But actually both could be true. You know, to maximize yield potential, we absolutely don't want it to have a bad day. But at the same time, it's certainly very versatile to the point that you could still have 230 plus yield potential and undergo stress.
Correct.
So.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, continue on that same thought of we've been dry, and talk a little bit about this HPPD carryover, because I think that's a little bit linked to some of our dry conditions that we've had here.
Yep. No, I think it's pretty much, I wanted to say entirely dryness driven. Not entirely, but without the dry weather, I don't think we see this as much as we've seen. So just a little bit of a background, you know, particularly in areas that are a little bit lighter in soil texture, so lower CECs, lower organic matter, and especially in areas where we have a decent amount of seed production as well, it tends to be more frequent. We're seeing a lot more HPPD carryover in those geographies. And kind of going back, it really kind of starts last year, where you know, farmers are using these HPPD chemistries to really try and get some good control of later flushes of crabgrass. And in seed production, you know, that can be a pretty big deal. So basically what's happening is they're using additional HPPD chemistries post into June to try and control the crabgrass, which, you know, some of those work very well, but you know, the late spray date, as well as the dryness last fall and especially the spring, those soybeans are really starting to see it now. So we didn't really see as much you know, carryover symptomology here a few weeks ago, but ever since the beans are getting bigger and the roots are getting more expansive, and that dry weather persists, it's really soaking up that chemistry. So, you know, we'll throw some pictures up here to kind of take a look at, but it's becoming very prominent, and it's certainly something that some of those chemistries don't really have a very high likelihood of having that carryover, but just the conditions and then the time that it was applied this past year has making it is making it very prevalent.
So it sounds to me like we're seeing it because a lot of things aligned either correctly or incorrectly, however you phrase it,
Yep.
to make it happen.
Yep, and that's usually the case with a lot of different
Yeah.
carryover situations. The HPPDs are known to carry over. Some of them, are more prone than others. The other thing that can come into play that we've seen, not 100%, is, whenever HPPDs are applied pre, and then coming back with another, a different HPPD chemistry, even though those are totally both on label, just having that additional load of different HPPD potentially is causing some additional carryover as well. That being said, we've seen it without any HPPD applied pre, just post, and still seeing it. But I think there's that possibility of having both those applications. So, from a management standpoint, some of those situations, they do have irrigation. They can kind of water to kind of help that problem along, but some it's not. And in some of these areas, it really doesn't have anything to do with production areas. It's just, heavier rates, dry soil, maybe sometimes double up, and lighter soil textures as well. So it's a year that it's been pretty prevalent, and just gotta keep an eye on it and hope it kind of works itself through it.
I think that it sounds like a rain would help us for
Rain would help for a lot of
cases.
things.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. It's amazing what rain will cover up.
It's true. Yeah. Start to see all of our dirty laundry when we don't get a rain for a while. Yeah. So the next topic that we were going to discuss a little bit was rootworm. So I know that's not right now. It doesn't feel like the typical time when we discuss rootworm. We're going to do a lot more in-depth rootworm discussion later on in the year. But a couple weeks ago, around June 4th-ish, I saw down in Warren County, I saw lightning bugs. You saw them 3 or 4 days later up in Bureau County.
I had my kids trained to watch for them. I'm sure you all would be surprised.
Yeah, I'm not shocked. Enlist their help there. So we all know like the first time you see lightning bugs, that coincides very well with rootworm hatch, and so I think it's safe to say that rootworm hatch is underway right now in northern Illinois. They're out there. They're starting to feed. You have done a couple root digs here, kind of seeing them. You're seeing a few, maybe some first instar, a little bit of feeding so far, right? Yep.
First and second instar, I'd say would catch most of it. So I've done some digs in our Smart Stacks Pro trials. One in Rochelle, one in Joe Davies County. So we're getting up there in the state. So fewer GDU accumulations, but we're still seeing them. A little bit early to tell any trait differences because the larvae are just getting started. But they're definitely there. They're definitely active. I would say that there's probably a decent amount of pressure there so far. I even saw kind of an outlier, but digging in some of the untraded stuff, we even saw one pupae. So those getting ready to become a beetle already. So obviously that one hatched a while ago, but in that untraded corn, they can go through their life cycle quite easily. So that probably had something else to do with it. But we're seeing it's pretty easy to find, but they're pretty tiny and they've got some feeding to go yet. So probably in maybe in a month we'll come back and do some more evaluations and we'll get it on video there too.
Yeah, sounds good. Anything else you want to add on that? I think we just kind of want to put a plug in there. It's certainly, they're out there. We can start scouting for them, take a look, but we'll do a really good, fun, in-depth root dig at some point.
Yep, absolutely. I don't think I really have anything to add on that. Okay. You had a GDU update?
Yep, so I have the GDUs that we've been following along here. Remember, we took them from April 5th. It's kind of the first time that I had anything planted, so I've been going with that date. Peoria down south, they're at 936. Their average GDU accumulation is 813, so we're well ahead there. I mean, everybody's well ahead there. Big Bend up in Whiteside County is at 891. They're usually at 841. DeKalb is at 864. They're usually at 735. And then Freeport is at 875, and they are usually at 689. So they're way ahead there.
Okay.
Just kind of like we've had all year long there.
Right.
Yeah. So thanks for listening in, guys. Let us know if you have any questions, if you have anything that you want us to address in future updates, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.